Hello everyone, my name's Craig and I'm an alcoholic. I've also been diagnosed with severe depression, general anxiety disorder and complex PTSD. So I don't say that for your sympathy. I say that so that you know that everything that follows in this entire series of videos is not coming from a textbook, university degree, it is coming from my own personal experience. And what follows is simply my thoughts and opinions on mental health, addiction, recovery and hope. Before I begin, if you or someone you know is struggling with alcoholism, addiction, or have mental health issues, I strongly urge that you seek out some professional advice. There are a number of organisations you can turn to, not the least of which here in Australia are Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Beyond Blue on 1300 224 636. If you don't know where to start, check in with your doctor and see what they have to say. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and if you think this video will help someone you know, feel free to share it. So where to start? What does that mean, being an alcoholic, having depression, anxiety, complex PTSD? So first, let's look at what those diseases actually are. Alcoholism is a two-part disease. Yes, it is actually defined by the World Health Organization as a disease, so it's a proper medical condition where a person cannot stop or control their drinking. First, you have a physical addiction to the alcohol coupled with a mental obsession about it. These days, professionals tend to refer to it as alcohol use disorder. Alcoholism is not so much about the quantity a person drinks, although it is very common for a person to drink excessively. It's not about whether they drink every day or just binge every now and then. It's more about the relationship a person has with alcohol. And when the primary way that person copes with life, they will continue drinking despite the fact that it's causing them harm. For me, the obsession would start, gee, a drink would be nice. No, I'm not having one. Just one. Go on. No, it'll be all right this time. And the back and forth would go on all day until eventually I said, oh, okay, just one. And then I'd have one and the physical craving would kick in and I would be compelled to have another. And that would be followed by another and then another until I either ran out or passed out. At the end, I wasn't even having the back and forth as to whether or not I would drink. I just accepted that I would at some point every day start drinking. What about depression? So depression isn't just simply feeling sad. It's not a sign of laziness or weakness. What it does is it alters the way a person sees themselves, sees the world, sees their future. And it can present in many different ways. One of those is persistent sadness, or they might lose interest in pleasure or activities they once enjoyed, changes in sleep patterns, changes in appetites, thoughts of suicide and death, fatigue, and the list goes on. Anxiety, on the other hand, is a natural human response to stress or perceived danger. Everybody gets it from time to time. Have you ever had butterflies in your tummy? That's a form of anxiety. However, when it becomes intense, frequent, difficult to control, and begins to interfere with daily life, it becomes problematic. And it may present as excessive worry that is difficult to control, and symptoms may include a racing heart, shortness of breath, feeling on edge, sleeping problems, and again, the list goes on and on and on. You can find out more about these online if you like. Complex PTSD is a little bit different. So there's there's regular PTSD and then there's complex PTSD. So regular PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder is usually caused by a single traumatic event, such as a car accident, a violent crime, a terrorist event, or something along those lines. It could be anything that the person has perceived as being traumatic. Whereas complex PTSD develops where a person experiences prolonged and repeated traumas over months or even years. childhood trauma is quite often the cause behind it. And the person with complex PTSD may relive that trauma through intrusive memories, nightmares, and flashbacks, just like regular PTSD. They may avoid reminders of the trauma and feel constantly on alert or be hyper vigilant. Um, Additionally, though, a person with complex PTSD might have persistent feelings of shame, difficulty regulating emotions, trust issues, and a deeply negative self image and belief that they are beyond repair. So, how does all this apply to me? So, I wasn't diagnosed until much later in life. In fact, it wasn't until I sought help for my drinking that it happened. But as a kid, I was brought up in what I thought was a pretty normal household, very middle class in a small country town a couple of hours north of Adelaide. And I do have to mention at this point that my mother was an awesome person. She did her absolute very best in very trying circumstances. My father, not so much. The truth is, when you are surrounded by something constantly, it becomes your normal. So there are instances of abuse in my childhood, mostly emotional, but it's safe to say that I experienced it all. I was bullied at school mercilessly, and looking back, I didn't really have a positive male role model in my life. My father certainly wasn't one, and my older brothers had left home by the time I was about age 10 or 11. Um, and then I left home at age 16 to go and join the Royal Australian Navy. And while I was never employed to a war zone, I served in a time of peace. Um, I still got to see and do things that no living human being should ever have to see or do. Um, what the Navy did do was teach me how to drink. It was a massive drinking culture back then. The military, I believe, still is. Everything was rewarded with beer. Again, I had no role models saying drink in moderation, just the gung ho attitude of let's get pissed. Leaving the Navy and coming back to Adelaide had me rebel against authority a touch, and I found myself gravitating towards people that were not necessarily of good standing in the community. You know, I'm talking criminals, drug dealers, thieves. They were lots of fun. The parties were awesome. The girls loved a bad boy. But let's just say they may have been operating on the wrong side of the law, and by way of association, so was I. Generally speaking, they were the people your mother warned you about. And again, unfortunately, hanging out with them, that meant I saw and did some things that no living human being should ever experience. Then finally, across the years, I've had the experience of being at the scene of a number of car crashes and other events that at the time I didn't see as traumatic, but they were. Not to mention a very serious assault that occurred on a night out in Adelaide that left me with severe facial injuries requiring plastic surgery to put my head back together. This almost definitely played into my mental health big time. So from that brief overview of my life, you can see clearly now, or I can see clearly now, that there has been trauma all the way through. As a child, I had my first suicidal ideation as a result of bullying at about 13 or 14 years of age. I always felt uncomfortable. I never fit in, not with my family, and certainly not with my peers. I always felt apart from, not a part of. The closest I ever came to feeling like I fit in was when I played sport, football in the winter, cricket or tennis in the summer. I wasn't gifted with much natural ability, but I did have sheer bloody minded stubbornness when it came to practice, and as a result, I ended up being okay at it. I still possess that same stubbornness today, and that stubbornness came in very handy when I finally decided to put the drink down. Looking back, I can see the anxiety and the depression kick in, and with all the traumas I experienced, I do sometimes think it's no wonder I developed complex PTSD. So all of that mental health was undiagnosed until I was in my 40s. But it really came to a head and stayed there when I was in the Navy. I didn't have a name for what I was feeling back then. I couldn't explain it. I certainly didn't voice it. I was becoming a man, doing manly things, shooting and learning to blow things up. It was a very sexist and misogynistic time. But that's how it was in the military then. And all through that, nobody asked me what was going on in my head. Beautiful thing back then was that I had found a solution: booze. I didn't even realize that's what I was doing. Um, what I was doing was drinking to excess as often as I could so my head would go quiet. And then every time I'd wake up, I'd have a little bit more to add to the pile because I'd wake up with guilt and shame and remorse about the night before. Not always, especially in the beginning when drinking was mostly fun, but definitely at the end when drinking was mostly not fun. And the further along the road of life that I trudged, the worse things got, until eventually, even with my exceptionally low moral bar, I had to admit the person that I actually was did not align with the person I thought I was. I had become a person that was untrustworthy, dishonest, a liar, a cheat, a thief. I had become the person my mother had warned me about. I couldn't guarantee my actions once I put one drink in me, and I would never just have one. Never. I could be happy, mad, sad, bad, glad, punchy, or sleazy. And if you're really lucky, you might get to see all of the above in one session. At the end of my drinking career, I'd knock off and wait around work for the sales team to finish so I could have a beer with them. I'd have one while I was waiting for them, then I'd have one with them. Then I'd have a roadie on the way home. If I had dinner, I'd have a couple while I prepared it. Then I'd have a couple with dinner. So I'd be 6 or 8 beers into the night before I even got thought about what I was doing for the evening. But usually what would happen is I'd open a bottle of wine and drink that, or maybe I'd have another 6 pack, or I'd finish the night off with 3 or 4 shots of whiskey. And they wouldn't be standard shots; they would be, good healthy shots. And that was Monday. Rinse and repeat for the rest of the week, except if it was a party night. Then it was game on. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it would be all of that plus whatever I'd consume at the party that I was going to, or the pub, or wherever. To put that in perspective, two standard drinks a day, up to a maximum of 10 standard drinks in a week, is the recommended amount of alcohol a person can drink without increasing the risk of alcohol-related health issues. I was having 10 standard drinks by dinner time, or earlier if it was the weekend. And the crazy thing is, I was not a particularly heavy drinker in alcoholic terms. I was by normal standards, but I know of others that would drink twice or even 3 times as much as me. And all this time, my behaviour was getting worse. The guilt, shame, and remorse of each night and each bad thing I did kept adding to the pile of my mental health. Until one day something happened. I woke up, nothing unusual about that, except a couple of things happened that Sunday morning. And the first was I remembered the night before completely. I remembered what I did, what I said, and what I was thinking as I did and said those things. And I was horrified. Even I had to admit that it was bad. The second thing I realised was that I normally couldn't remember all of the night before. And it had been a long time since that had happened. It was normal for me to wake up and just be missing parts of the previous evening and just put it down to, well, I must have had a good time. So among my guilt, shame, and remorse that morning was also this deep feeling, deep down in my gut, that something, I didn't know what, but something had to change. Or I suspected something bad would happen. I'd die through misadventure. I'd die in a car crash because I was always drunk driving. Or worse, I'd kill someone else in a car crash and then I'd have to kill myself because I don't want to go to jail. And I suspected, I wasn't sure, but I suspected that the quantity and the frequency of my drinking had something to do with all the bad stuff that was happening to me. Not knowing about rehabs or DASA, I booked an appointment with my doctor. And when I finally saw him 5 days later, I was 100% honest with him about the quantity and frequency of my drinking. The conversation went something like, he said, so what brings you in today? I think I might have a little drinking problem. Okay, and why do you say that? Oh, there's moments of nights out that I can't remember, and the next day, and I'm doing heaps of bad shit when I'm drinking. I'm drink driving all the time. Okay, and how much are you drinking? So I told him what I just told you. And he says to me, and why now? Why do you want to do something about it now? Why have you come to see about me now? Bear in mind, I'd only seen this doctor one time before in my life. But I told him, the last time I was here, you struck me as a person that would tell me like it is. I think I need to hear what you have to say. And he said, okay, first let me ask you some questions. And he started, have you ever decided to stop drinking for a week or so, but only lasted for a couple of days? Yes, but I haven't tried it in years. Do you wish people would mind their own business about your drinking? Yes. Have you ever switched from one drink to another in the hope this would prevent you from getting drunk? Yes. Have you ever had or needed a drink in the morning? No. Do you envy people who can drink without getting into trouble? Yes. Have you had problems connected with your drinking in the last year? Yes. Has your drinking caused trouble at home? Yes. Do you ever try to get extra drinks at a party because you don't get enough? Yes. Do you tell yourself you can stop drinking anytime you want to, even though you keep getting drunk when you don't mean to? Yes. Have you missed days of work because of drinking? Yes. Do you have blackouts? Blackouts when we've been drinking for hours and days and we can't remember it all? Yes. Have you ever felt your life would be better if you didn't drink? Yes. So I got 11 of those 12 questions right. I thought I was doing pretty well. In hindsight, the one I said no to, have you ever needed a drink in the morning, should have been yes to, but I figured if you don't get out of bed until after midday and the first thing you do is have a beer, it's not in the morning, right? Anyway, he went on and asked me more questions, which I didn't realise at the time were mental health related. He got to do a survey of my mood and so on, circle the appropriate word. And at the end of all that, I remember this very clearly. He goes, well, Craig, I think you're right. You do seem to have a problem with alcohol. Have you considered Alcoholics Anonymous? And I'm like, isn't that for alcoholics? Yes, and I think they could help you. Hey, I'm not that bad. Surely we can try something else first. Well, yes, there's some other things we can do. We'll get you started on some antidepressants. I'm depressed. Yeah, severe depression, and you've got an anxiety disorder as well, and you probably have had it for a very long time. So we'll start the antidepressants, we'll get you in to see a psychologist as a matter of urgency, and I'll give you something to help you with withdrawals. But I really think you need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. So we made an urgent appointment with the psych. I went and got the prescriptions filled. The only other thing he said to me, apart from come back and see me in 3 days, was do not drink on this medication. This was not long after Heath Ledger had passed away. And he said these drugs are similar to the medication that Heath Ledger was on, and he drank on them. It didn't end well for him. I took him at his word, promised myself I wouldn't drink and take the meds, but I did say to myself, I'll start the pills tomorrow because I had a fridge full of beer and a bottle of scotch to take care of. And if I wasn't going to be drinking anytime soon, I needed to put a dent in them. And a dent I put, a big dent. And true to my word, the next day I got up and started taking the meds. That was August the 3rd, 2013, and that was the last time I woke up with a hangover. I have not had a drink since. All right, I'd like to say from that moment on, everything was fine and dandy. Not by a long shot. The first few days were a special kind of hell while I detoxed, but that did soon settle down, and then I was just left with my thoughts and no anaesthetic. It took a while for the antidepressants to kick in, and while I was going back to see my doc every few days, it was about twice a week, I kept telling him I didn't want to swap one drug for another, the bitch for the witch, as it were. He counselled me and got me through it, kept on suggesting AA, and I kept refusing. It was just a little drinking problem. I've got this. Remember, I'm very stubborn. Keep in mind at this point, I'm on the maximum dose of the antidepressant, probably 15 milligrams of Valium a day, sometimes more, and I was just barely holding it together. I'm doing all the things. I'm seeing my doc, I'm seeing the psych on a weekly basis, I'm taking the meds, and I got worse. Um, and then the psych tells me I've got complex PTSD. On top of everything else, now I have this diagnosis as well, which now I think about it makes sense. It explains a lot of stuff about me. But I didn't know how to live, especially with all of that. And then all of the trauma, anxiety, and depression of years past just came flooding back all at once. I was getting worse and I didn't know how to deal with it. I'm doing everything. I wanted to get off the piss so I didn't die, and now that's not just looking like a viable alternative, it's looking attractive. And not only that, if I was going to take myself out, there's some people that I really wanted to take with me. I wasn't just suicidal, I was homicidal as well. Suicide by cop was looking like a good idea. These thoughts bounced around my head for weeks. I started making plans, just in my head. I didn't want to leave any evidence behind, and I didn't want to share them with anyone for fear of being locked up. Then after about 6 or maybe 8 weeks of these suicidal thoughts and the depression getting worse and anxiety going through the roof, I had what we call a moment of clarity. I was driving back from Victor Harbour in a work car. I was driving really, really fast. My thinking was if I crashed in a work car during work hours on work time and died, my family would get a good payout. But as I crested Wollonga Hill, I was doing about 160. It occurred to me that for the previous 20 minutes or so, I had been picking out trees that would do the job. And then it occurred to me that all of these thoughts that I was having weren't particularly sane thoughts. And if I am to take myself out, I owe it to my family to give everything a shot before I do that. So I decided to go to a meeting for alcoholics to check it out, see if there was anything to it. Couldn't hurt, right? Got nothing to lose. I found a meeting that was a little out of my area so no one would know me and went along. It was a Friday night and it was life changing. For the first time ever in my life, me and my crazy head felt like we fit in. I felt accepted and that I belonged. These were people just like me. They had the same thoughts and patterns of drinking. They laughed at the most macabre shit. A lot of the stuff I was thinking, they were laughing about. I related a little bit to everyone that shared some of their story that night. And I often say I wasn't an alcoholic until I went to that meeting because I walked in that night with a little drinking problem and I walked out knowing I was an alcoholic. Now, I'd like to tell you that everything was rainbows and unicorn parts from that time on, but it wasn't. Shit still happened. Those meetings could help me with my drinking, but I still needed all the other help for my mental health, and that, my friends, has been a journey. A couple of different psychologists along the way, third counsellor as well, a few different medications, regular visits to the doctor, many, many, many chats with different people about their mental health and what helped, and time. The days turned into weeks, that turned into months, that turned into years. And it took a while, but eventually the cravings for booze went away. And these days I can be around it. I can go to the bar and buy my partner a drink and myself a Coke, and it's not a problem. It doesn't bother me if she drinks. She can have one or two and stop. I couldn't do that. These days I would no sooner have a beer than I would drink the bleach that's under my kitchen sink. They're both poison to me. Um, and then, and to be honest, this wasn't that long ago. I realised that my head was quiet, peaceful. Some would say serene. Today I am happy. I love my life. I love the people in it. I'm content. How I got here was a journey, and it's one that I hope you'll relive with me over the course of the next few videos. There's 7 in this series, plus my TikToks, and then I'll look at doing some others. But before we get to know how I healed, you had to know what I was healing from. So I hope this has given you a bit of an understanding of where I came from and what happened. Because just as my life didn't get burned to the ground in one day, it took me a touch over 27 years of solid drinking to end up where I was. Um, I wasn't going to rebuild it overnight. And fortunately, it didn't take me 27 years to do that. So if you found this video interesting, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. And remember, the first step in overcoming mental health stigma is talking about it. And together, we can make a difference.